that gets you closer back to the natural world of not everybody is going to be kept alive. You know, our doctors and hospitals are doing amazing things for troops and coming out of Afghanistan and Iraq and places like that. You get guys coming back with no arms, no legs, they're still alive. They're being put with prostheses when they can and whatnot, and they're living. But in the stuff that we're talking about, that will not be an option. Just something to keep. And it's kind of sobering when you start to think about it, picturing one of your family members. It could even be an axe accident. You know, the new season of Alone, there's a girl out there on the island, she hits herself in the hand with an axe the other day. We're waiting to see how that plays out. Now, if she had no help coming, from the way they're leading up to it, it sounds like she might have cut a tendon in her hand. So if you're in a post-event, you hit yourself with an axe, you bust a tendon, your thumb doesn't work no more. You know?
Well, even the risk of burns goes up because you got people who aren't used to heating with wood. You've got people who aren't used to heating with wood, who aren't used to using camping stoves or using propane as their primary cooking and heating source. And suddenly you have a lot more flames, a lot more fires, you have boiling water being carried from one place to another. And I know from hearing stories from my grandmother that burns were an awful way to go in the early days when there was no treatment for them. And you know, it was kind of one of those things for, during her period of time, the thought was that you did not give water to a person who had been severely burned. So a lot of them ended up dying from dehydration and infection and shock, and it was a miserable time.
Because that speaks back to that higher level of care thing, you know. If someone was to get burned, if you're setting up a scalding tank to scald a hog and a little kid runs up and turns that over on themselves or somehow gets into it or they get splashed by a hog when it gets dropped in there, what are you going to do for them? You know, if there is no higher level of care available. There's not much you can do. And we think we're going to save everybody because in the movies, you know, people get shot, it's a little hole in, it's a little hole out, they're all good to go. But in the reality of things, the real world, it don't work that way. Somebody catches a bullet generally, like even an arm and a leg, it shatters bones, it blows out big pieces of meat. It's not pretty, it's real hard to deal with. We were talking about something like CPR. You know, if you have somebody that's clinically dead, for lack of a better word, what's the point of performing CPR on them if you bring them back? What are you going to do with them then? That's a hard decision to think about. And I'll just say, well, we're going to try anyway. I'm going to try anyway. I'm going to do it anyway. And of course, we're going to try. You know, everybody's going to try. But you got to weigh the consequences of that, of what they're going to be like if you do bring them back, and how much resources are you going to consume trying to keep them alive that might be used better on somebody else later. And what kind of quality of life, if they have that, will they have afterwards? You know, like Franklin mentioned, people aren't used to cooking with wood. The burns, well, just getting the wood. People trying to fell trees that ain't never done it. People trying to, you know, buck up the logs, delimb them, split the wood. How many accidents there's going to be? You know, I even mentioned it in one of my books. A guy cuts himself with a chainsaw, and what happens to it? You know, that'll be a fatal encounter.